My girlfriend and I plan to take a road trip to Vancouver, Canada, in the summer of 2019 and then stay at Golden Ears Provincial Park. We enjoyed camping and wanted to do something different to make the most of our holiday. My girlfriend had never gone outside of the United States, so it sounded like a crazy new experience with Airbnbs in each state and the Great Canyon. The grand final was a designated campground at Golden Ears, which was near to Alouette Lake. We packed poorly, brought a large tent, a smorgasbord of fruits and vegetables to have healthy snacks, stowed them in the too small cooler, and carried a chopping board with a knife to break up the stacks while driving. We began in California and drove our bright red Ford Fiesta across Oregon and Washington until we arrived in Vancouver. We spent a day or two in each state, drank a little too much, and stayed out late. Canada was the most enjoyable aspect. We strolled barefoot on the rocks with our toes in the freezing cold lake, climbed about and reached a lovely waterfall where we observed a couple snapping photos of each other for nearly an hour, and we started imitating the same postures from afar. Except for that other pair, everything was beautiful, and the campsite was vacant. We went to bed early that night since it was peaceful, and I awoke to crackling outside my tent while my partner was snoring and still asleep, and I didn't think much of it because it was pitch black and probably an animal, but the cracking proceeded closer to the tent, and I sat up and grabbed my phone. The brightness turned on and I switched it off, almost blinding me with light. However, in that 2 seconds I could see a person directly outside our tent. The frozens sat up, they weren't moving, and were close enough to unzip the tent if they wished. I began poking my partner because I had no idea what to do. They woke up and I said there was someone outside the tent. Then I heard footsteps, quiet footsteps walking out the campsite. My partner begins saying loudly what repeatedly in the sleepy haze: a car truck is parked right outside our camping area, and no one is near our campsite. It starts up and then just drives away. They didn't turn on their headlights until they turned a corner, and we were out of sight, so I couldn't make much out, but it looked like a truck. Now I'm shaking and my partner can't figure out what's going on. I want to leave, but Golden Ear locks the gates until 6 or 7 a.m., and it's 1 a.m., so we're stuck here. I force us to move to the Ford Fiesta and sleep in the cramped car. She falls asleep immediately and thinks I'm paranoid. Could it have been a park ranger? It seemed too strange a behavior for a park ranger. And I sit there wide awake for 2 hours. The car is locked and I want to sleep, but I can't. I'm in the passenger seat, my partner in the driver's seat asleep. It's 3 a.m. I'm sitting half awake, and I hear a car slowly driving up, slowly rounds the corner, and pulls up directly in front of our campsite, again in the same spot. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I had no weapon except the kitchen knife we bought for the fruits and vegetables, so I grabbed the knife and tried to make myself look angry, crazy, and big. I sat up in the passenger seat holding the kitchen knife. I keep it straight at eye level, instead deadpan out the truck in the pitch darkness, just like the father in the American Gothic painting. A light beams right into my face from inside the vehicle as the truck comes to a halt and goes off. I gaze back horrified in my bright Ford Fiesta, clutching the huge kitchen knife. The truck starts up and switches on its lights, which remain on, blinding. The vehicle pulls away, turns around, and returns to where it came from. My pulse racing, I wake up my partner and tell we need to get the hell out. We pack by just tossing stuff in the vehicle and wait there till 6 a.m. We drive home and don't stop, rewatching and trying to make sense of the event until we both realize This happened in August 2013. I was camping in Barron Falls, which is northwest of Cairns in far north Queensland, Australia. I, a 21-year-old female, was camping with 2 male friends from Estonia, Theo and Charlie. We slept at an unofficial campground rather than walking down the tourist road, climbing over a fence, following a train track for a few km, and then veering off into the deep woodland, descending to the river. It was not easy to travel to this location, and there was no cell phone coverage. Theo had heard about it from friends who had earlier told him how gorgeous the spot was. We were surrounded by a tropical jungle and a short distance upstream from the waterfall. We walked to the waterfall after setting up camp, when both Theo and Charlie jumped from the bluff into the water below. I opted not to follow since I am afraid of heights and the potential of injuring myself. I sat and watched them for a while before returning to camp, and reading my book, I was totally relaxed, enjoying the serenity, taking in the beauty around me. What had been an exciting, adventurous day was interrupted by a deep, sinister laughter coming from the forest surrounding our campsite. I felt chills run through my body as I scanned the forest, trying to detect where the laughter had come from, but there was nothing I tried to forget about, convincing myself that it was all in my head. When Charlie returned and told me that they had forgotten to bring firelighters for the campfire, they claimed they'd have to go to the nearest store to get more, and that I should simply wait at camp. I told them I didn't feel comfortable staying at camp, but didn't mention the laughter I'd heard before, because I didn't want them to think I was stupid. And for context, at the time I had a large crush on Charlie, so I didn't want him to think I was stupid, and they said it would be fine because they'd be back before dark. So reluctantly I agreed and let them go. It was around 4 p.m., and I was still reading my book when I realized that the walk back to the cars would take about half an hour, so they'd be gone for a little more than an hour at this time of year. Dusk would be around 5 p.m. or so, and I'd be alone in a remote area in the dark. I diverted my attention with my book, but as dusk fell and the darkness took control, I struggled to read the pages, and fear began to set in about an hour after I began to hear footsteps in the forest. My first thoughts were that Charlie had returned, and I was instantly relieved that I was no longer. I listened for their voices, but heard nothing. My heart fell as I realized it wasn't them, and I began to fear. Then came the laughing, the same deep, sinister laughter I'd heard before, but this time it felt much closer. I jumped to my feet and examined the forest till I noticed him. He was standing on the other side of the stream that linked to the river, on a log. What I saw was completely weird. He was dressed immaculately in a tuxedo with a top hat, and all I could think about was how he was able to travel to this place in such clean and formal attire. At first, I thought he was a ghost, or that I was hallucinating. I performed a double take and saw I wasn't mistaken. I inspected the man's face. It's difficult to explain, but he looked to have suffered from serious burns and had extensive scars covering his face. His hair was shoulder-length, wiry, and unkempt, and he laughed the same laugh I'd heard in the forest. We locked gazes for what seemed like minutes. If he charged at me, I planned to sprint into the forest, since the tiny creek between us would at least slow him down. He then said, "What are you doing here all alone?" with an uncomfortable smile. Fortunately, I was able to remain cool and tell him that I was camping with my friends, and that they had just gone to purchase supplies and would be back soon. The man laughed again. He asked how long we'd be there for. I lied and said we were leaving the next day. It seemed as if the man wanted to provoke a reaction, or that he wanted me to panic and run, and that he wanted to chase me, but I remained calm and acted as if we were having a normal conversation. I think this confused him. The man sounded frightened and claimed he noticed someone else camping upstream and was going to check on them. He departed, and when Theo and Charlie arrived, I quickly told them what occurred, and they laughed, thinking I was making it up and that it was a poor attempt to scare them. Charlie recognized I was serious when tears began to form in my eyes. Charlie assured me that I would be fine and had me sleep between him and Theo for the next 2 nights. I barely slept at all those nights, listening out for laughter, but fortunately never heard it again for several years. I looked online for any tales of such encounters and came up empty-handed, but I've always wondered what would have occurred if Theo and Charlie hadn't returned at that precise moment. I shuddered at the concept. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the man's motives and whether I was justified in being afraid. I haven't gone camping. When I was 9, my sister, dad, stepmom, and I were at a camping resort called Palmetto Island. It wasn't a traditional island. Rather, it was surrounded by palm trees and vegetation, except for the road leading in and out of the area. We stayed in a camper, and before I get to the actual story, let me set the scene. There were roads in the resort, but they were only for golf carts and other smaller vehicles. The entire place was dense with palm trees and vegetation. If you weren't on the road, in a campsite, or at one of the recreational areas, you were in a forest. My family and I were all hanging out at one of the playgrounds, where I made a new friend with whom I was playing. At some time, the rest of my family had left me to play with my new buddy, and ultimately he went as well, leaving me alone as the sun began to set. This wasn't our first visit to Palmetto Island, and I assumed the walk back to our campsite would be short. However, I got turned around and ended up in the area where people would normally launch boats into the water to go fishing. There was a group of people, and I asked for directions. They guided me in the proper direction, and I began to walk. I didn't understand it at the time, But my family had noticed that I was no longer at the playground, and they began driving about in our golf cart and another one they had hired. If they hadn't, I wouldn't be sharing this with you people. As I'm going towards our campground, a car drives up behind me, and one of the individuals I'd asked for directions rolls down the window. Remembering that I'd been walking for about an hour or two, he gives me a ride and urges me to take the front seat. I accept and get in the car, fatigued and weary from walking. I know now that this is something one should never do. We were going in the proper direction until he passed by the entry near the campground, at which time I realized something was wrong. They're asking me to drive past it, but he doesn't respond. By some divine intervention, I see my father on a golf cart heading in the other direction towards us, and I start shouting and waving at him. He pulls up in front of the car and stops, as does the guy driving. I rush to my dad, who has his concealed carry drawn on the guy, and as soon as I'm out of the way, he phones the cops and holds the guy at gunpoint until they arrive and arrest him. I'm only telling you this story now because I discovered last week that the guy and his entire family had done this before and gotten away with it. I try not to think about what would have happened if my father hadn't arrived. Join us as we delve deeper into the darkness, where every shadow hides a chilling. Thanks for watching our horror stories. And remember, the nightmare is far from over. Stay tuned for more spine-tingling tales of terror. Don't forget to subscribe, and may your nights be filled with the sweetest of nightmares.